After months of doing dirty work, Caleb and I have been focusing on finishing the cab. It's covered with a polyurethane primer from Summit Racing, and the interior is coated with lizard skin, sound barrier, and ceramic insulation. We have a home-built paint booth set up in the garage with some ventilation fans in place for circulation. We have an inline dryer on the airline and a pretty good spray gun that will hopefully compensate for our completely novice paint skills. So here we go, hoping for the best, but knowing that we're doing something completely outside of our skill set.
And then the dash, I'll cover that.
Yeah,
What
I don't
about,
care about that. The part that shows on the dash.
I don't know, is someone going to be looking at my underside of my dash? I find that a little uncomfortable.
You don't want people looking at your underside?
I don't know, that the underside of my dash. Dude, I don't.
I get uncomfortable when people look at my underside.
Of my dash. Okay.
Would you like to clarify that, Caleb? To make sure we all know.
My dashboard?
For me, I have to admit, I think the fun part is figuring things out. Sometimes doing things is fun too, but usually I get tired of doing things. So I have to find a new thing to figure out. Maybe that's why this project is so much fun, because every time
Everything's new.
everything's new, every time we turn around, we're figuring something else out.
Right, next one.
Caleb, did I make you nervous when I said I didn't want any runs? You're acting just a little bit tentative, which is good because we don't want any runs. But you're doing just fine. Remember, long strokes, keep the gun moving, and cover, but you don't need to over cover. There will be a second coat.
Caleb did almost all of the painting, which is the objective here. Caleb has been doing all kinds of things on this project. I want it to be a learning experience for him and for me. I enjoy doing this, but he's been cleaning and sanding and disassembling and building and reassembling, and now he did the priming and he's doing some painting. And so I want him to have that experience. He frankly did, I thought, a great job. Now look, recognizing this is blind leading the blind, clearly showed some massive improvement as he went as well, from short strokes and incomplete passes with inadequate overlap to long flowing strokes with even distance to the painting surface, and better overlap, and massive improvement over the course of this coat. And overall, really was really happy with what he did, and he was too. It was fun to see him light up as the color came around. He likes the color, and actually had a good time painting it. So we'll call that objective accomplished in that regard. We're using some Eastwood paint. I'll put a link to that in the description, which was an interesting kind of a discovery in itself. When we went looking for paint, the default response every time I asked for color swatches was to bring out the metallics. And at first I didn't even notice until I started looking more deeply at the color swatches, and then had to ask if there was a solid color book. And yeah, sure enough, they had that, but it was just assumed that we wanted metallic. We didn't want metallic for a couple of reasons. One is that novices probably at this point ought not be playing in the metallics, and the second is for a classic restore. The metallic isn't really what we were looking for. So we did eventually find some solid, but it took some doing. Even some paints that had no indication of being metallic turned out to be metallic paints, and so we actually even tinkered with using Duplicolor. I can't even find a solid Duplicolor paint. We found some Eastwood paint that worked well. It is a single stage urethane, again considered base coat with clear coat, and ultimately concluded that this would be simpler, especially for Caleb to do it, and would provide a result that was just fine for what we're trying to accomplish. Again, not a showroom quality kind of a thing. Caleb will be the one driving this, so the more effort we put into it, the less likely we are to be willing to put him behind the wheel. He did quite well here. It was fun to watch him, particularly right across the firewall, kind of get that motion and get it all covered throughout. We did learn some things in this little experiment, and while the end result I think has been fine, we ended up with more of an orange peel coating than I expected. For those who have experience here, probably just watching this, you would notice that we would get some orange peel in some ways. Distance to the target, for example, we were a little bit low on air. I think the pressure needed to be a little higher. But you can see some of that in some of this as it goes. The reflection from the lights above is starred out in an orange peel type of a reflection pattern. So we did end up working that and went through and cleaned some things up with some 400 grit sandpaper. Actually sanded down most of the exterior and hit it again. This time we made really 3 major adjustments.
Okay, Caleb, I don't know if I told you this. I think the biggest problem we had with paint on round 1 was temperature.
You really think getting this shop, what is it, above 70 was a big thing?
I think so. Did I tell you what adjustments I made for round 2?
All I heard from you was adjustments on temperature.
I did 3 things. I raised the temperature, which, by the way, if you look at the paint, it says that it should be done between 70 and 80 degrees.
Instead of, what was it, 60?
Well, I don't know. Did you look?
I don't know.
I mean, the heater wasn't even on, so it's pretty much like whatever temperature.
It's pretty warm out,
outside.
though. Because it is getting towards spring, so I wouldn't see why.
I'm guessing it would have been 60-ish in here for round 1. So yeah, I turned it up. I had it set around 75 for round 2. That made a big difference, I think. And I turned up the air. It's just higher pressure.
Oh yeah. You were gonna play with the gun. That's right.
Yeah. And I was closer to the panel, closer to the target. So I was closer to, 6 or 8 inches instead of like 12. All 3 of those things together were too much because I had runs. But it really changed the end result a lot.
And ended up with a finish that is really pretty good. We'll still cut and buff to clean it up, but you can see the difference in the reflection from the LED lights above, where it's actually pretty good and arguably could be used as it lay. But since we've got it here before we mount it up onto the frame, we'll cut and buff and polish the thing out just a little bit further. Yeah, in the end, I'm happy with this. We do have just a couple of runs we need to deal with. So we'll use some razor blades and nib files to clean those up and cut and buff the whole thing. And then at that point, we should be ready to mount this on the frame and start doing some reassembly.